But it was a joke that made me think. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle recently made a big announcement that got people all over the world's attention after he made a heartbreaking finding that put his leadership and resolve to the test. As problems and controversies grew over his stand on important issues, his revelation made many people wonder what it means for his legacy and the future of the Church. Come with us as we figure out what this news means. What makes a visionary leader strong? Luis Antonio Tagle was born on June 21, 1957, the first child in a very holy Catholic family. He had a father named Manuel Tapacho Tagle, who was Tagalog, and a mother named Milagros Gokim, who was Chinese and Filipino. Before Milagros decided to spend all of her time with her family, she worked at Fair PCI Bank. Tagle's grandfather, Florencio, was a member of the Spanish Christian Principalia, a social elite group, before the 1896 Philippine Revolution. His family tree can be tracked back to Imus Cavite. Sadly, Florencio was hurt in a bomb explosion during World War II. As a result, Tagle's grandmother had to work at a nearby diner to support the family. The first school Tagle went to was St. Andrew's in Paranaque, Rizal, where he finished childhood and high school by 1973. Because he was friends with monks, he felt called to religious life. He went to the San Jose Seminary, which was run by Jesuits. This helped him later with his studies at Ateneo de Manila University. He got his Bachelor of Arts in Pre-Divinity there in 1973. Later, at the Loyola School of Theology, he got his Master of Arts in Theology. He studied under Joseph A. Komenchak at the Catholic University of America from 1987 to 1991 to get his Ph.D. in Sacred Theology. In his dissertation, he looked at how Paul VI taught and practiced episcopal collegiality. Komenchak said that Tagle was one of the best students he had met in more than 40 years. He also said that Tagle could have become Asia's leading scholar if he hadn't become a bishop. Tagle also took classes at the Institute of Pope Paul VI University and was given honors degrees by both Catholic Theological Union and La Salle University. Tagle showed that he could read in Spanish, French, Korean, and Latin, as well as Tagalog, English and Italian. When he was ordained in the Diocese of Imus on February 27, 1982, he began his work as a priest. He began as an associate priest at San Agustin Parish, in Mendez Núñez, Cavite. Later, he took on other roles, such as spiritual director and rector at the Imus Diocese Seminary. After going to school in the U.S., he worked as the parish priest at Nuestra Señora del Pilar Cathedral Parish, and as the Episcopal Vicar for nuns. On top of that, he taught religion at Tago Tay's San Carlos Seminary and Divine Word Seminary. He worked with Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger on the International Theological Commission, which was made by Pope John Paul II. From 1995 to 2001, Tagle also served on the editing board for the History of Vatican II project. What kind of boss is Tagle, and why do people doubt his ability to lead? Where did the debate about him come from? A boss who cares and takes action. Tagle had a big impact on many people, not just those who knew about management and theology. He really lived by the values that Pope Francis supports. He was known for having a lot of kindness and being smart. His work was always aimed at helping the poor and those on the outside, showing that he was committed to real answers and change. In sub-Saharan Africa, where many Catholics were having a hard time with money, he led one of his most important projects. As an alternative to just saying nice things, Tagle did something by putting ideas into action. Under his direction, the Vatican worked with nearby towns to get money for schools and job training programs, making long-term ways to make people's lives better. His goal was more than just to fight poverty, it was also to strengthen faith. These actions showed how deeply the Church cares about meeting both spiritual and material needs. Tagle played a big role in bringing people together in Myanmar, a country torn apart by political and racial conflict. He knew that making political deals wasn't enough to bring about peace. It needed people of different religions to work together and talk to each other. By bringing together Catholic and Buddhist leaders, he created a space for understanding and unity, giving hope to communities that were split up. Tagle was even more special because of the way he approached enculturation. As a Catholic, he pushed for the use of native music, art and language in religious ceremonies. He thought that the church was an important part of societies, not just something that happened outside of them. His vision gave people the tools they needed to share their faith in real and powerful ways, which strengthened their connection to the church. During his time as president of Caritas Internationalis, Tagle was in charge of the Share the Journey program, which tried to bring attention to the problems travelers and refugees face. His support was more than just words. In Lebanon and Jordan, he went to refugee camps and talked to people and listened to their stories. He showed care by using his position to give them a voice and remind everyone of how human they all are. Tagle was in charge of important global problems like poverty, migration, and climate change. He encouraged the Vatican and non-religious groups to work together, putting action over words. His vision included a church that worked for justice and stood with people around the world to solve problems that affect the whole system. Tagle was put in charge of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples by Pope Francis in 2019. This put him at the head of the church's missions work. In this job, he was in charge of spreading Catholic beliefs, especially in places where the church was growing quickly. Many people saw Tagle as a likely candidate to become pope because he had a good relationship with Pope Francis based on trust and shared values. Francis was humble and friendly, and Tagle's way of leading mirrored those qualities. This helped him connect with regular people. Millions of people loved him because he was easy to talk to, whether he was answering theological questions or sharing meals with newcomers. His rise was not an accident. It came from a strong belief in the values of kindness, acceptance, and working together to solve world problems. But Tagle had a long way to go and would face many problems. Under all the praise were complicated problems that would test his ability to lead the church through its hardest times. But why do some people still not like Tagle? Is there more to his story, or is it just about the chance that he will replace Pope Francis? Check back to find out. There have been many challenges and disagreements on the way to becoming pope. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has been seen as a top candidate for a long time. People around the world admire his caring guidance and ability to connect with people. Still, some experts say that his path to becoming pope is not a sure thing. His close ties to Pope Francis have won him a lot of respect, but they also present some problems. The College of Cardinals thinks that Tagle needs to show that he is more than just an Asian Francis, and create a unique personality that speaks to them. 3 big problems have been found that could make it harder for him to run. To begin, Tagle faces tough opposition from other candidates, including the Singaporean Cardinal William Goh. Like Tagle, Goh is Asian and knows English, which fits with the church's growing focus on pidgins outside of Europe. People think that Goh can connect with the church's more conservative groups, which is a skill that Tagle, who is known for having more liberal views, might find hard to copy. Second, Tagle's image as a modern person is praised by many, but it also comes with risks. He has fought hard for welcoming people into the church, speaking out against hurtful words, and pushing for acceptance, especially for LGBTQ Catholics. At a recent Lambeth conference, he warned against racial and cultural conflicts that could hurt the church's purpose, and criticized populist movements that he thought distorted what unity was all about. Progressive Catholics agree with these points of view, but more traditional members of the church leadership may not like them. Lastly, critics have pointed out that Tagle seems hesitant to take a stronger stance on problems related to China. The connection between the Vatican and Beijing is a touchy and complicated subject, and some people think that Tagle's lack of public comments on it could hurt his chances of being elected. People who were watching thought that other candidates might seem more willing to deal with these problems openly, which could give them an edge in the eyes of the cardinals. In addition to these problems, Tagle's similarity to Pope Francis had made people both admire and fear him. Analysts said that Tagle's words often sounded like Francis's, especially when it came to immigration and populism. For example, They thought back to what Francis said when he got back from Kazakhstan, where he talked about migration as a chance to make the West's culture and ideas better. In the same way, Tagle had warned against actions that could split the spiritual unity of the Church, stressing the need to be welcoming and friendly. These shared beliefs made Tagle more popular with progressives, but they also tied him closely to Francis's legacy, which some parts of the Church might see as a bad thing. It looked like these groups wanted a head who could show they were independent, and give them a new point of view. Critics also pointed out that Tagle's time as Archbishop of Manila made things more complicated, because he spoke out against former President Rodrigo Duterte. The Manila Standard said he was bringing the Church into political politics. Reports said that people who didn't agree with Tagle thought he went too far by allowing politically charged sermons that seemed to attack Duterte's government. They said that these acts went against the Constitution's separation of church and state, and made people worry about Tagle's ability to stay neutral. People who thought the next pope should put spiritual guidance ahead of political involvement were worried by this idea. While he was working in Manila, Tagle was criticized for how he handled cases of clerical misconduct. Some critics said he didn't hold some priests accountable enough for their actions, which made people question his ability to keep the church in order. Some people thought he wasn't being firm enough, which made them wonder if he had the resolve and power to lead the church well. Why didn't Tagle talk about the problems he was having, and what made him finally speak out after all these problems? The silent struggle of Cardinal Tagle, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, has been seen as a major option for Pope for a long time, but his path to becoming Pope has not been easy. People all over the world admire him for his charm, vast knowledge, and ability to connect with people. But doubters often wonder if he can step out from under Pope Francis's direction and find his own way. Analysts' questions grew as they looked at his positions on important issues, especially his attitude toward China, his image as a progressive, and his ability to bring a divided church back together. Tagle's reluctance to talk about China has caused a lot of debate in church groups around the world. Some people don't like the agreement that Pope Francis and the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) made to improve ties between the Vatican and China. They think it goes against the Church's beliefs. Tagle hasn't said anything bad about the Chinese government, because he agrees with Francis's careful approach. Some people who don't like him say that his silence could be linked to how easy it seems the Vatican is being with the CCP. My Tagle, with Tagle. Critics have pointed out that Tagle's reluctance is even more noticeable given his high status in the Vatican. Tagle had a lot of power over the Church's attempts to reach people around the world, while he was prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples from 2019 to 2022, and then as pro-prefect of the Dicastery for Evangelization, which took its place. Even though he was involved in talks about the agreement between the Vatican and China, he hasn't talked much about the problems Christians in China are having. Tagle's past adds another level to this situation. As a Filipino with some Chinese ancestry, he comes from a country that has territorial issues with China. Some people are even more skeptical about whether he would deal with politically touchy issues if he became Pope because of this link. They think that the fact that he won't say what he thinks about the deal between the Vatican and China makes it hard for him to handle other geopolitical problems that might come up in the future. During the trial of Cardinal Joseph Zen, a well-known opponent of the Vatican's deal with China, this lack of reaction was especially clear. Even though Zen's trial was pushed back, his situation showed how tense things are between the Church and Beijing. China and Pope Francis had a friendly relationship. During his trip to Kazakhstan, Pope Francis even tried to set up a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, but it was turned down. Tagle, people who backed Francis's strategy of dialogue, didn't say anything about these events, which led critics to see him as part of a policy that some said hurt the Church's moral standing. Finding common ground with Pope Francis had both pros and cons for Tagle. His words often sounded like Francis's, especially when it came to movement, acceptance, and communication. Progressives liked these shared beliefs, but also tied him closely to the memory of the current pope, which could make more conservative members of the Church dislike him. Some people said that the Church needed a head who could show independence and give a new point of view. Tagle's campaign was made harder by negative comments about how well he did in the Philippines. People said he was running the church as a partisan politician, while he was Archbishop of Manila, because he publicly opposed Rodrigo Duterte's government. Some people thought that Tagle broke the Constitution's separation of church and state by letting homilies with divisive political themes go on. Others wonder if his involvement in politics took away from his focus on being a spiritual guide. There was a lot of criticism of how Tagle dealt with clerical misbehavior in Manila. Some critics said he didn't hold some clergy members responsible enough, which made people question his ability to keep the church in line. Many people thought that his obvious laxity hurt his chances of being a strong leader, especially since everyone was looking forward to the next pope. In spite of this, Tagle continued to be very important in guiding the church. People respected his ideas about the Second Vatican Council, but they also caused some disagreement. Tagle wrote a chapter about Pope Paul VI's acts during the council, as part of the editorial team for the important history of Vatican II. Some people said his analysis wasn't objective, even though it was praised for being smart. Still, his defense of Pope Paul VI's method, which took into account many points of view, showed how well he understood how church leadership works. Tagle had problems with more than just his home life and schoolwork. He competed with tough opponents in the College of Cardinals, such as Singaporean Cardinal William Goh, who was good at connecting with religious groups. Goh had a strategic advantage because he was good at bringing people with different ideas together. Even with these problems, Tagle's supporters said that his openness to new ideas and ability to connect with people all over the world made him a shining example of hope for the future of the church. They think that his focus on discussion and welcoming everyone could help the church deal with problems around the world, but critics said he needed to face his flaws to improve his chances of being elected. Is there something new that Tagle found that led to the big news he made? The very important news. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, a major figure in the Catholic Church around the world, recently made a major announcement after having a very moving experience. A lot of people are talking about this idea, which ties together his personal beliefs and his hopes for the church. During a special meeting at the Vatican, he talked about the important problems that neglected groups are facing, and how the church needs to help them. The cardinal made his announcement after becoming heart-wrenchingly aware of how hard things are getting for persecuted Christian groups around the world. Tagle talked about his time as head of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, and then the Dicastery for Evangelization, where he heard many stories of Christian pain, especially in places where religious freedom is very limited. He said that this knowledge made him take a more proactive approach to these important issues. Tagle talked about a new project that will help Christians around the world who are being attacked in his speech. He gave a detailed plan for how to help in both material and spiritual ways, and he also called for stronger diplomatic steps to protect religious freedoms. This program, called Faith in Solidarity, was a turning point in his leadership, because it showed the church's duty to move quickly in times of trouble. Tagle said that this project came about after he thought about it himself, and after visiting areas with a lot of strife. He talked about going to a war-torn part of the Middle East, and meeting people who had lost everything because of their faith. He was deeply moved by how strong they were, and how devoted they were to their beliefs, even when they were being persecuted. Tagle said their pain was a clear call to action, and emphasized that the church needed to move quickly, and with compassion. The news showed that Tagle had changed his mind in a big way, about some of the church's most controversial topics. People were upset that he didn't seem to be doing anything about highly sensitive issues, especially the Vatican's relationship with China. He addressed these complaints directly. He didn't say anything about the deal between the Vatican and China, but he did say that it can be hard to talk to countries that restrict religious freedom. Tagle's made it clear that his new plan would be all about openness and responsibility, saying again that the church is committed to protecting its weakest people. People who saw it said that Tagle's tone had changed from being cautious to making this statement. A lot of people saw it as an effort to find his own way of leading, different from Pope Francis, who he has been compared to a lot. By responding to the complaints that were directed at him, especially those that said he was too shy to talk about politically touchy issues, Tagle showed that he was ready to deal with problems head-on.
which is something that many people think is essential for anyone who wants to become pope. It was also important that the news came at the same time as the trial of Cardinal Joseph Zen, who is a well-known opponent of the agreement between the Vatican and China. People saw Tagle's focus on standing with Christians who are being attacked as a subtle recognition of the Church's duty to support those who risk their lives for their beliefs, even though he didn't say anything about the trial itself. People who disagree with Tagle are wondering if his plan will really lead to change, or if it will just be a way to avoid talking about past problems. Some people don't think he can handle the complicated geopolitical problems that come up when trying to protect Christians who are being persecuted, especially in places like China, where the Church's relationship with the government is very tense. On the other hand, people who back the initiative have called it a big step forward.